Hey guys, what's up? It's the Merc here for Bulkshade Games, and today I want to talk to you about Pacific Rim. That's right, gonna do another movie review. I know we just did our last one a couple weeks ago, but I happened to go see this movie last night, and I really want to talk about it because it was awesome, and I really enjoyed my experience in seeing this movie. First, let me say this. If you're a science fiction fan, if you're a anime or mecha fan, if you're a giant monster or Godzilla fan, if you're a kind of dystopian survival fan, or if you're just a fan of cool action movies, this movie is for you. It covers kind of all those bases. Like there's just scenes in it where you're like, oh my god, this is awesome. The story is nothing revolutionary. I'll say that. You know, there's your whole big monsters from another dimension come to Earth and they're like, rawr, we're gonna eat all the people. And humanity, being humanity, is like, no, you're not. This is our planet. Go home, monster. You're drunk. And so our response is to create walking tanks, aka the Jaegers. Because, you know, whenever there's giant monsters, we make giant armored suits. It's like humanity's natural response to things. But that's, yeah. And the basic story is, you follow Riley Beckett, who's the main character. You're introduced to him in the beginning. Something tragic happens. He's trying to run from his past. The war takes a turn against humanity's favor, which leads to the kaijus sort of winning. The Jaeger program, that's the giant robots, is started to be decommissioned in favor of building a giant wall, which the politicians think will keep out the kaiju. The main commander of the Jaeger program doesn't believe that to be true, so he kind of brings together all of his remaining Jaeger assets and says, I'm going to launch my own assault, and I'm either going to shut the gateway between the worlds or die trying. That's the story in a really, really boiled down nutshell. There's some cool side plots that go on. One of my favorite is the two scientists that work for the Jaeger program. The one is all math. He's very typical, by the books, scientist type guy. And I actually think the actor that played him played on Torchwood from BBC, which I don't remember the character's name, but I'm pretty sure they were the same character. Then you have the other scientist, who is a very just eccentric, out there. He's a kaiju specialist. He's all about like digging into the kaiju and exploring them. And you get into this whole subplot of him wanting to drift with a kaiju brain, which drifting is what lets the two Jaeger pilots pilot the Jaegers together. And he feels that if he can drift with a kaiju brain, he'll be able to find out what their plan is and what they're doing. Some interesting information comes out of that when it finally does happen. It also brings Ron Perlman into the movie for a little bit. He's in it for a little bit. He has a pretty interesting part. He plays just a very outlandish character, which is cool because Ron Perlman does that kind of thing pretty well. There's the whole there's some cliches. I mean, don't get me wrong. You have the main character who is like the kind of washed up. He has to get back into it, and then you have another character who's very much the I am the epitome of Jaeger pilot. What are you doing here? You're just going to slow me down. And they end up coming to grudging respect. Kind of one of the cliche tropes that you see in a sci-fi movie. But it was done well, so it was enjoyable. That's just some of the kind of cool little side plots that go on there. There are some subtle kind of like messages. There is talk of pollution and like ruining the environment. That comes up in the movie, not for very long, and I don't preach on it or anything. There's that kind of subtle message of coming together, humanity coming together to face a crisis, which we've seen that in other movies. So it's just subtle. And you have that subtle message of politicians that don't know what they're doing because they want to fund something that isn't going to work instead of continuing to fund something that is working. But all those messages are pretty subtle. I mean, I would in no way say it is some kind of a political movie. It's very much a just action science fiction romp of giant robots versus giant monsters. Which, how could you not be happy with that? The cinematography and the CGI, awesome. Like the kaiju, the giant monsters, the very organic feeling. They feel very realistic. The way they move, the way their presence is on screen, it's very buyable. The way they interact with the environment, it's very buyable. And this is one of those rare cases where I personally think that the CGI served them better than practical effects would have. There are some practical effects in the movie, but just Godzilla back in its day, that was practical effects monster with little model city guy in rubber suit smashing things, and it was good for its time. But the CGI monsters, was so much better. Don't get me wrong, if I'm watching a movie like The Thing or Alien, I want my monsters to be practical effects because it makes them creepier, I think. The jerky kind of unnaturalness of the puppets and the animatronics, I think, adds to a certain level of freakiness. Whereas in a movie like this, where you want your monsters to be very fluid, you want them to interact with the environment, destroy things, look like they're taking the proper kind of damage from a blow, CGI is a much better way to go. The Jaegers were badass. I mean, I have a tendency anytime I watch a science fiction movie and it's humans versus any kind of aliens, even if the humans are supposed to be the bad guys, I end up wanting the humans to win. You can ask anybody that went and saw Avatar with me. I was rooting for the humans the whole time instead of the blue alien cat bunny people. It's just the way I am. I'm a human, man, and deep down I want the humans to win. So the Jaegers, to me, were just fantastic. I will say I would have liked to have seen a little bit more diversity between Jaegers, maybe even a couple more Jaegers, because at the end of the movie there's only 4, which ties into the whole storyline of the Jaeger program being slowly shut down, decommissioned, blah 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 blah. However, when you have giant robots that are that badass, I wanted to see more in it. That was the thing. Like I said, there's only 4 of the Jaegers at the end, so they spend a little bit of time. They're each kind of individualized. They have a little bit of backstory that they give you towards the middle of the movie. Whereas the kaiju, they always give them names and like they're different categories, but I couldn't really. I remember one's name was Leatherback, and that's it. And a category 5 shows up at some point at the very end of the movie, but that might also be because I just wasn't as interested in the kaiju as I was in the Jaegers. Because, the Jaegers, I know you had the Crimson Typhoon, you had the Striker, you had Gypsy Danger, and you had, I believe, Kodiak. So, yeah. And, they all had their own sort of fighting styles or strengths, which made them all pretty cool. Gypsy Danger was the main character's Jaeger. It had plasma cannons and deployable swords. So it was pretty cool. It was I think the second oldest that was in commission for the movie's fight. Then you had the Kodiak, which that was the oldest I think that they got at, and that one was the Russian Jaeger. It had served, they said, oh, it had been in Siberia and it held the line for 6 years, so they kind of gave it that typical, really hard, badass Russian kind of storyline. It had, like piston-driven ram fists. It kind of came off Kadoran to me, to be honest with you. Anybody that's played War Machine, it definitely kind of came off as being like a Kadoran colossal. I mean, if it would have had any kind of gun batteries, I would have been really just boom right there. There's my Kadoran colossal, even though it doesn't look anything like the Conquest. The Red Typhoon was Hong Kong's. It was piloted by triplets, which that was kind of a cool idea. And their whole thing was, because it was piloted by triplets, it had a third arm. So it had this like crazy fighting technique, and it's had blade hands. And had like a pivoting torso, so like it could leap behind kaiju and still be facing it. It was pretty crazy. And that had supposedly fought in like an engagement for 6 straight weeks against kaiju in Hong Kong. And then you had the Striker, which was an Australian Jaeger, and it was supposedly the newest Jaeger that they had. It was like the only one of 2 or 3 of its kind that had been produced before the program got shut down. And that's the one in the previews that you see with like the 2 rows of cannon batteries on its chest. Yeah, that's the Striker, and it's supposedly the fastest Jaeger. So like I said, each one did have their own kind of uniqueness to them. They did put some effort into making them stand out and really kind of giving them the hero status that they had in the world. In the end, it does just basically boil down to Gypsy Danger and the Striker, because the other 2 get destroyed, which I was kind of disappointed, but, it was what it was. But the way they interact, the way the Jaegers and the kaiju interacted with one another was fantastic. It was very, very smooth. The combat scenes were just fantastic. I mean, the way they threw punches, took damage, dodged, and grappled, plowed into buildings together. It was just very, very smooth. Not to kind of down on another movie, but comparing it to like Transformers, where it was kind of a blocky action sequences, and they didn't really show you the whole like robot on robot. They'd show you glimpses of like fists and things. The Pacific Rim, it was like full on. It was like watching a contact sport, and it was great. It was awesome. The characters in the movie are enjoyable. There's no character. Sometimes you watch a movie and you're like, oh my god, this is the main character? This is the guy I'm supposed to root for? Nope. No, that didn't happen in this. Like, I liked the main character. I liked his commanding officer. I liked the girl that ended up being his love interest / co-pilot. Even his like rival was pretty cool in the end. So you had good characters in that, and story progression was good. And the nice thing with Pacific Rim is it was a 2-hour and 55-minute long movie. It was almost 3 hours. So the ending felt like an ending. It wasn't like when I saw World War Z that was only, I think, an hour and some minutes long, where when the ending came, I was left kind of going, there should be more here. Which, don't get me wrong, the end of Pacific Rim left me wanting more, not because I felt that it wasn't finished, but because I felt that they could give me more. Like, I think, a prequel would be awesome, where they show, some of the actual battles in the Kaiju War, things of that nature. But that's just because it really, it was really kind of what I expected, and that made me happy. So I will say that, yes, it met my expectations, kind of, I think like 90-95%. It wasn't 100% what I expected, but that was fine. It was right up there where it needed to be, and that made me happy. And as a gamer, it set off all kinds of ideas in my head of, what tabletop gaming system do I know that I could play, like giant monsters versus giant robots? What kind of a scenario could I do? You could almost do it with War Machine versus Hordes. If you changed the mechanics around a little bit, where you got rid of the focus and the fury and that kind of thing. But just things like that. And I thought, how cool would an RPG like that be? Where D20 Future, which sadly for those of you that don't have it, is out of print these days, but I think you can still find it on Amazon and eBay. That had rules for mecha and giant robots, so it'd be very easy to do a giant robot versus giant monsters game in that. So yeah. And if you guys saw the movie and you had any ideas like that of, how could I bring this to the tabletop? How could I bring this to my RPG group? Leave a comment. Let's discuss some of these ideas. That would be fun. Or leave a video response talking about some of the things you've decided to do. Maybe you've run an RPG or a tabletop game already. But that's pretty much it, I think, for this review. Like I said, I really liked the movie. It was definitely worth seeing it in theaters. I think it's one of those movies that the experience is better if it's watched in a theater compared to watching it at home. Unless you're one of those lucky people that has a big screen TV and surround sound, in which case it'd probably be more fun at home because you're at home. But overall, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I'm not going to say it's a must-see, but I'm going to say it's a 5 out of 5. And it's definitely badass. So that's my feelings on Pacific Rim. If you guys like the video, or you want to talk about anything that the movie might have sparked for your gaming imagination or story writing imagination, please leave a comment. Or, if you just want to say that you like what we're doing here, you don't like what we're doing here, and you have suggestions on things we could do differently, go ahead and leave us a comment down there in the comment section. Likes are always appreciated, as are if you subscribe. It's always fun to see that we have found new subscribers. We always try to sub you back if you have your channel. And we'll see you next time here on Poolshed Games.